can you just give us a general overview? What are the numbers with Detroit overall? And then we'll drill down a little bit into a couple of the cities that you covered specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the census is always such an interesting time because every 10 years we get this like data dump of just an immense amount of information. And it tells us a lot about what's going on. So for Detroit, for example, for yet another decade, we saw a population decline. So, the 2020 census showed us that there were about 639,000 Detroiters in the city. That's a decline from 10 years ago, but that's not anything new. Like I said, this has been happening. I believe this is like the seventh decade that this has happened.
When it comes to cities like Detroit, other places around the state, usually there are some trends or some examples of cities that, kind of give us an overall view of what's going on around us in a lot of places. And two of the cities rather that you looked at specifically were Hamtramck and Highland Park. Is that correct?
Yep. Mhm.
So give me an overview as to what happened there, and then we can talk a little more about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Hamtramck and Highland Park, they're two different cities with their own city councils and city government with their own dynamics, but they're both engulfed by the city of Detroit. And so what we saw in the last 10 years was this kind of, population shift where one grew by a large amount and the other shrank. So Hamtramck, for example, the population grew by 27%. That's roughly 6,000 people. And a city that's pretty close to it, Highland Park, shrank by 24%. That's 2,800 people. And so that many people left the city. So you kind of see these very stark population shifts where one city grew and the other shrank. There were booming industries that existed in these cities, and then they left. And then it took the tax base with it, right? And so that's kind of a similar story to what happened in Highland Park. You had Model Ts that were being made there. You had Chrysler. You had these booming industries. And then, in the 1970s and the 1990s, these industries left and people left with them. And that kind of started that decline. A lot of people I talked to said that they lack city services, right? They don't have functioning streetlights. There are overgrown properties. It's just a difficult place to live in that regard. The schools are decimated. That's something that I heard over and over again is that, there aren't schools for students to go to. And so you have a bunch of these various factors, whether it's the fact that there aren't streetlights, whether it's the fact that, there aren't schools, there aren't city services. Combine all of that together, and those are some of the reasons that people may have felt like they wanted to leave the city.
When it comes to Hamtramck, they're going in a different direction. So what was the driving force behind their growth in population?
What I kept hearing in my conversations with people is that immigration is a big driver of it, and this has been the story of Hamtramck for decades, right? Several decades ago, you had German immigrants who came, and then Polish immigrants, and then Bangladeshi immigrants and Yemeni immigrants who came and found Hamtramck as a place to get their start. I had one person who I talked to. He's lived in Hamtramck for a couple decades now, and he said Hamtramck is a landing port for new immigrants, right? It's that place where you come, you get your job, you make money, you start businesses, and you get your start here. Some people move out to the suburbs, but other people find a place to stay here. And so that was one of the main reasons that a lot of people I talked to contributed to the population growth. You have people coming from Bangladesh, which is a country next to India. You have people coming from Yemen. And so there's a huge amount of immigrants that live in this city and whose families live here as well. That was one of the main things I heard over and over again is that, there's a sense of community. I talked to one person who said that, it's a 2 square mile city. I can go to the mosque. I can walk to the mosque. I can go to the grocery store. I don't necessarily need to drive there. I can just, walk there. Everything is within that radius, right? There's that convenience factor. There's that community factor. And so those were some of the driving factors. But overwhelmingly, like I said, immigration was something that kept coming up.